I was standing in my corner office on a Monday morning watching the sun rise over the city skyline. 7 years ago, I had nothing but a beat-up laptop and a dream. Now, my company was pulling in 7 figures annually. I thought I had conquered the hardest chapter of my life. Then my phone rang. It was my mom, and in 30 seconds, everything I had built nearly came crashing down around me. Before we dive in, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit that like button and subscribe if you have not already. Stay with me, because what my mom said next changed the way I see family forever. My name is Bill, and I grew up in a small town in Ohio. My dad was an auto mechanic who spent his days covered in grease-fixing cars for people who sometimes could not even afford to pay him. My mom worked as a cashier at the local supermarket, standing on her feet for 8 hours a day, scanning groceries with a smile even when her back was killing her. We were not poor, but we were far from comfortable. Every dollar was accounted for, every purchase carefully considered. I have a younger brother named Derek. He is 4 years younger than me, and from the moment he was born, something in our family dynamic shifted. Derek was a sickly kid, always catching colds, always needing extra attention. My mom hovered over him like he might break at any moment. And somewhere along the way that protectiveness turned into something else entirely. From a young age, I understood my role. I was the older brother, the responsible one. I started working when I was 14 years old, delivering newspapers before school, mowing lawns on weekends, helping out at the corner store for a few bucks an hour. I saved every penny I earned, dreaming of something bigger than our small town. Derek, on the other hand, never had to work for anything. When he wanted something, Mom found a way to get it for him. When he got in trouble at school, Mom made excuses. When he failed a class, Mom blamed the teacher. The phrase I heard most growing up was, "He is still young, you need to be patient with him." I remember one summer when I was 16. I had saved up for 3 months working extra shifts at the store, skipping movies with friends, eating packed lunches instead of buying food. Finally, I had enough to buy a used bicycle from a neighbor. It was not fancy, but it was mine. I had earned every single part of it. Derek wanted to borrow it one afternoon. I hesitated, but Mom gave me that look, the one that said I was being selfish. So I let him take it. He came back 2 hours later with a bent wheel and a broken chain. He had tried to do tricks and crashed into a fence. I was devastated. 3 months of work destroyed in 2 hours. But before I could say anything, Mom stepped in. She told me I should just give the bike to Derek since it was broken anyway, and I could always save up for another one. She said brothers should share. I swallowed my tears and said nothing. That was the first time I learned that my sacrifices did not matter as much as Derek's wants. When I turned 23, I graduated from college with a degree in marketing. The job market was brutal, and after months of rejection letters, I started doing freelance web design just to pay rent. I was living in a tiny apartment that cost $350 a month, eating ramen noodles for dinner most nights. But I was determined to make something of myself. That is when I noticed a gap in the market. Small businesses were struggling to manage their operations, juggling spreadsheets and paper records and outdated systems. I had an idea for software that could help them, something simple and affordable. I did not have money to hire developers, so I taught myself to code at night after finishing client work during the day. The first year was brutal. I worked 80 hours a week, sometimes more. I had no salary, no benefits, no safety net. My girlfriend at the time left me because I was never available. She said she felt like she was dating a ghost. I understood, but I could not stop. I was so close to something real. Year 2, I finally hired my first employee, a kid fresh out of college who believed in my vision as much as I did. We still were not making profit, but we had a handful of paying customers. Year 3, we almost went bankrupt. I had to borrow $5,000 from a college friend just to keep the lights on. I remember sitting on the floor of my apartment, head in my hands, wondering if I was crazy for believing this could work. But I did not quit. Year 4, we finally turned a small profit. Year 5 and 6, we grew steadily. I hired more people, moved into a real office, started paying myself a modest salary. And year 7, we crossed the $1 million mark. $1,200,000 in annual revenue, 20 employees who counted on me, and a future that finally looked bright. The cost was steep. I had given up relationships, missed countless family events, sacrificed my health. I gained 30 pounds from stress eating and lack of exercise. I developed chronic insomnia. But I had built something real, something that mattered. During all 7 of those years, where was Derek? He dropped out of college after 1 year because it was not the right fit for him. He bounced from job to job, waiter, retail, clerk, delivery driver, never lasting more than 6 months anywhere. There was always an excuse. The boss was unfair. The co-workers were jealous. The job was beneath him. At 30 years old, he was unemployed and living off the money Mom gave him from her retirement savings. She told me he just had not found his passion yet, that he was different from me, that he needed more time. I never argued. I just focused on building my company and hoped Derek would figure things out eventually. Then came that Monday morning phone call. I had just finished a meeting with a potential investor, someone interested in putting significant capital into my company. I was excited, feeling like all those years of sacrifice were finally paying off. My phone buzzed. "Mom," I answered with a smile. "Hey, Mom, how are you?" She did not ask about my day. She did not ask about my health. She went straight to the point. "Bill, I need to talk to you about something serious." Something in her voice made my stomach tighten. "Your brother is struggling. He is really struggling, Bill. And I have been thinking about this for a long time." I waited, not sure where this was going. "I want you to give Derek 50% of your company." I actually laughed. I thought she was joking. But the silence on the other end told me she was not. "Mom, that is not how businesses work. I cannot just give away half my company." "Yes, you can. You have everything, Bill. Your brother has nothing. This would make things fair." I tried to explain. I told her about the employees, the contracts, the bank loans, the legal complexities. A company is not a pie you can just slice up and hand out. She cut me off. "I need your answer by Friday. 50% to your brother, or do not bother calling me your mother anymore." The line went dead. I stood there in my office, my hand shaking, the phone still pressed to my ear. I could not process what had just happened. My own mother had just given me an ultimatum: destroy everything I had built or lose my family. The first thing I did was call Derek. Part of me hoped this was some kind of misunderstanding, that maybe Mom had come up with this on her own, and Derek did not even know about it. Maybe he would tell me this was crazy and help me talk some sense into her. He answered on the 3rd ring, sounding half asleep, even though it was almost noon. "Yeah." "Derek, it is Bill. Did Mom tell you about her plan?" There was a pause, and then a casual, almost bored response. "Oh yeah, she mentioned it. So, what do you think?" My heart sank. He knew. He was in on it. "What do I think? I think it is insane." "Derek, I cannot just hand you 50% of my company. Do you understand what that means? I mean, you have all that money, right? What is the big deal if you share some with your brother? It is not about sharing money. This is a business. There are employees, obligations, responsibilities. You cannot just walk in and take half. He laughed a cold, dismissive sound. You always were selfish, Bill. Even when we were kids. Everything always had to be about you. I was stunned. 7 years of sacrifice, and my own brother was calling me selfish for not handing over what I had built. I tried a different approach. I drove 4 hours to Ohio to talk to my parents in person. Maybe face to face I could make them understand. When I arrived, Mom was sitting in the living room, her arms crossed, her expression hard. Dad was in his recliner, staring at the television, avoiding my eyes. Derek was nowhere to be seen. Mom, please let me explain how this works. I sat down and walked her through everything. The 20 employees who depended on their paychecks, the contracts with clients who trusted us, the bank loan we were still paying off, the legal structure of the business that made it impossible to just transfer shares without major consequences. She listened, or at least she appeared to. But when I finished, her response crushed me. I do not understand all that business talk, Bill. All I know is you have a lot, and your brother has nothing. You just need to sign some papers. How hard can that be? Mom, Derek has never worked a day in this company. He does not know anything about software or management or sales. What would he even do with 50% ownership? You two would work together. He would help you run things. Help me run things, Mom. He cannot hold a job for 6 months. How is he going to help run a company? Her face turned red with anger. You are looking down on your brother. You always have. Just because you went to college and started a business, you think you are better than him. I tried to stay calm, but it was getting harder. This is not about being better than anyone. This is about reality. That night, I called a friend from back home, someone I had grown up with who still lived in the area. We got to talking, and he mentioned something that made my blood run cold. Did you know Derek owes money to some pretty serious people? Word around town is he has been gambling, got in deep. People are saying it is around $40,000. $40,000. My brother was in debt to the tune of $40,000 from gambling. Suddenly, the pieces started falling into place. This was not about fairness or family unity. Derek needed money fast, and a lot of it, and the quickest way to get it was to take half of my company and sell his shares. I called Derek the next day and confronted him directly. I know about the gambling debts, Derek. I know you owe $40,000. Silence. Then defensively, that is none of your business. It is my business when Mom is trying to force me to give you half my company because of it. Look, if you would just help me out, I could pay everyone back and start fresh. You would not even miss the money. You do not want to work in my company, do you? You just want to sell your shares and take the cash. Another pause. So what if I do? It is not like you need all of it. I hung up without saying goodbye. The next few days were a nightmare. Mom called every single day, sometimes multiple times. She cried. She begged. She reminded me of everything she had done for me, every sacrifice she had made to raise me. She told me I was breaking her heart. Then she switched to threats. She said she would write me out of her will. She said I would never be welcome in their home again. She said if I did not agree by Friday, I was no longer her son. My aunts and uncles started calling too. Word had spread through the family. and suddenly everyone had an opinion. Family comes first, Bill. Money is not everything. Your brother needs you. Not a single person asked about my side of the story. Not one person acknowledged the 7 years of work, the sleepless nights, the relationships I had sacrificed. To them, I was just the successful one who was refusing to help his struggling brother. Even my dad offered no support. I called him privately, hoping he might understand. Dad, do you really think this is fair? Do you really think I should just give Derek half of everything I have built? He sighed heavily. Son, I do not know much about business, but your mother is very upset. Maybe you could find some way to make her happy. That was his answer. Make her happy, even if it meant destroying everything I had worked for. Back at the office, I was falling apart. I could not concentrate on anything. I missed the follow-up meeting with the investor. My employees started noticing something was wrong. One of our biggest clients complained about a delayed project. Everything I had built was starting to crack because I could not hold myself together. I stopped sleeping almost entirely. 3 nights in a row I lay awake staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. The headaches became constant. I stopped eating properly. And in my weakest moments I started wondering if they were right. Maybe I was being selfish. Maybe I should just give in to keep the peace. Thursday night, the night before the deadline, Mom called one last time. She was crying harder than I had ever heard her cry. She told me she had already revised her will to remove me. She told me she had failed as a mother if she had raised a son who would not help his own brother. She told me this was my last chance. I love you, Bill, but I love Derek too, and he needs you more than you need that company. She hung up. I sat alone in my apartment, surrounded by the evidence of my success. Nice furniture, a view of the city, awards from industry organizations on the shelf. But none of it felt like it mattered anymore. I thought about my 20 employees, their mortgages and car payments and children's school fees, all depending on our company staying afloat. I thought about the nights I had gone without sleep, the meals I had skipped the girlfriend who had left because I could not give her the time she deserved. And I thought about Derek, who had done nothing, sacrificed nothing, and yet somehow felt entitled to half of everything. Was I really the selfish one Friday morning? I woke up after maybe 2 hours of restless sleep. I looked in the mirror and barely recognized the man staring back at me. Dark circles under my eyes, pale skin, a haunted expression. But somewhere in that reflection I saw something else too. I saw someone who had worked harder than anyone in his family. Someone who had built something real from absolutely nothing. Someone who had a responsibility to 20 people who trusted him. And I realized something that should have been obvious all along. I had spent my entire life trying to earn my mother's approval, trying to be the good son, the one who never complained, the one who always sacrificed. And no matter what I did, it was never enough. She always wanted more. This was not new. This was a pattern that stretched back 30 years to that broken bicycle, and probably even further. I had been conditioned my whole life to put Derek first, to give up what was mine, to accept that my needs mattered less. If I gave in now, it would never end. There would always be another demand, another sacrifice expected, another piece of myself I was supposed to hand over. I made my decision. I was not going to do it. I called my lawyer first thing and made sure there was no legal way anyone could claim any part of my company without my consent. Then I sat down, and wrote out exactly what I wanted to say. Then I drove to Ohio one more time. When I arrived at my parents' house, I found more than I expected. It was not just Mom and Dad. It was aunts, uncles, cousins, all gathered in the living room like some kind of tribunal. About 10 people total, all staring at me as I walked through the door. Derek was there too, sitting in the corner looking smug. Mom spoke first. "Have you made your decision?" Everyone was watching. This was clearly designed to pressure me to make me fold in front of the whole family. I took a deep breath and stood in front of them all. "I have made my decision, and the answer is no." The room erupted. Voices overlapping, people shaking their heads, Mom starting to cry. I raised my hand and kept going. "Before you say anything else, I want all of you to hear what I have to say. Then you can judge me if you want." The room quieted down, though the hostility was thick in the air. 7 years ago, I started a company with nothing, a used laptop and an idea. For 7 years, I worked 80-hour weeks. I did not take vacations. I did not have relationships. I sacrificed my health, my social life, everything that most people take for granted. I looked around the room, making eye contact with each person. There were nights I could not afford to eat. There were months I could not pay myself a salary because I had to pay my employees first. There was a year when I almost lost everything and had to beg friends for money just to survive. I turned to Derek. "Where were you during those 7 years, Derek? When I was working until midnight every night, where were you? When I was skipping meals to save money, what were you doing? When I almost went bankrupt, did you offer to help?" Derek said nothing, but I could see his jaw tightening. "The answer is you did nothing. You contributed nothing. You sacrificed nothing. And now you want half of what I built." I pulled out my phone and showed the screen to the room. "But that is not even the real reason you want this, is it? You do not want to run a business. You want to sell your shares and pay off your gambling debts. $40,000, Derek. That is what you owe." Gasps around the room. Clearly, Mom had not shared this detail with the extended family. I showed them the text messages where Derek had admitted he would sell his shares immediately. I showed them evidence of the gambling debts. I laid out the whole truth that had been hidden behind Mom's narrative of the struggling younger brother. One of my aunts spoke up, her voice uncertain now. "Derek, is this true? You borrowed $2,000 from me last year. You said it was to fix your car." An uncle chimed in. "You borrowed $500 from me too." One by one, relatives started realizing they had been deceived. Derek's charming requests for loans had all been feeding his gambling habit. Derek's composure finally cracked. He jumped to his feet, his face red with rage. "This is typical. This is so typical. Everyone always loved Bill more. Bill, the golden child. Bill, the success story. Nobody ever cared about me. That is not true, and you know it," I said calmly. "Mom gave you everything. She made excuses for every mistake you made. She gave you money every month from her retirement. She protected you from every consequence. And what did you do with all that love and support?" Derek had no answer. He just stood there shaking with anger. Then something happened that I never expected. My dad stood up. In 30 years, I could count on one hand the number of times my father had directly contradicted my mother. He was a quiet man, a man who avoided conflict at all costs. But now he was on his feet, and when he spoke, his voice was firm. "Enough." Everyone turned to look at him. I have stayed quiet for too long. Way too long. He looked at Mom. "Honey, I love you, but We have made mistakes with Derek. We have made a lot of mistakes. We spoiled him. We protected him from everything. And look where it got him." He turned to me. "Bill, I am sorry. I am sorry I never stood up for you. I watched you work yourself to the bone, and I never said I was proud of you. But I am. I am proud of who you are and what you have built, and I do not agree with what your mother is asking. I never did." I felt tears forming in my eyes. In 30 years, this was the first time my father had ever openly taken my side. Mom looked shattered. She was looking at Derek, really looking at him maybe for the first time. The evidence was all there. The debts, the lies, the manipulation. "I did not know," she whispered. "Derek, I did not know about the gambling. Why did you not tell me?" Derek did not answer. He just stormed toward the door, knocking over a chair on his way out. He slammed the door behind him, and nobody moved to follow. I walked over to my mom and knelt beside her chair. "I am not giving Derek my company, and I am not apologizing for that. But I am not angry at you either, Mom. I know you love him. I know you were trying to help him." She was crying, really crying now. Not the manipulative tears from the phone calls, but genuine tears of a mother realizing she had been blind. "But loving someone does not mean protecting them from every consequence," I continued. "Sometimes love means letting them fall so they can learn to stand on their own." Mom nodded slowly. She did not say she agreed. She did not apologize. But something in her face told me she was finally seeing the truth. I hugged both my parents and then I left. As I drove back to the city, I felt something I had not felt in weeks, maybe months, maybe years. I felt free. The days after that confrontation were not easy. Winning an argument does not heal the wounds underneath. I still felt the weight of what had happened, the betrayal from my own family, the realization that my mother had been willing to disown me for my brother's sake. But alongside the pain, there was clarity. For the first time in my life, I had stood up for myself without apologizing, without backing down, without sacrificing my own needs to keep everyone else happy. I went back to work with renewed focus. I apologized to my team for being distracted and explained in general terms that I had been dealing with a family crisis. They were understanding and supportive, and it reminded me why I had fought so hard to protect what we had built together. The investor I had missed the meeting with agreed to reschedule. We had a productive conversation, and while they ultimately decided not to invest, they referred me to another firm that was a better fit. 6 months later, we closed a funding round that allowed us to expand into 3 new markets. My relationship with my father transformed completely. For the first time in my life, we talked openly and honestly. He called me every week sometimes just to chat, sometimes to share things he had never told me before. His regrets, his own struggles with my mother's favoritism toward Derek, his admiration for what I had accomplished. We made up for 30 years of silence in the span of a few months. With my mother, the healing was slower. For the first 2 months, we did not speak at all. I did not call, and she did not either. It was painful, but I knew I could not be the one to reach out first. I had nothing to apologize for. In the 3rd month, she called. She did not mention the ultimatum or Derek or the company. She just asked how I was doing, what I had been eating, whether I was getting enough sleep. It was a small step, but it was something. Over time, we rebuilt our relationship, though it was different than before. The unconditional deference she once expected was gone. I had boundaries now, and she learned to respect them. She never fully admitted she was wrong, but she never made demands like that again either. As for Derek, I heard through relatives that he eventually got a job in construction. He was apparently doing okay, finally forced to support himself without Mom's financial cushion. We have not spoken since that day he stormed out of the house. I do not hate him. I genuinely hope he finds his way. But I also know that our relationship may never recover, and I have made peace with that. I spent a lot of time reflecting on what I learned from the whole experience. I realized that my entire life I had measured my worth by how much I sacrificed for others. The more I gave, the more I felt I deserved to be loved. But that is not how healthy relationships work. That is not love. That is transaction. True love does not keep score. True love does not demand that you destroy yourself to prove your loyalty. And true love certainly does not threaten to disown you for having boundaries. I started seeing a therapist to work through some of the patterns I had developed in childhood. It was not easy to examine those old wounds, but it was necessary. I learned to recognize when I was falling into old habits of people-pleasing, of putting others' needs so far ahead of my own that I disappeared entirely. I also learned to take care of myself in ways I had neglected for years. I started exercising again, eating proper meals, taking actual time off. For the first time in 7 years, I went on vacation a whole week with no laptop, no emails, no work calls. It felt strange at first, like I was doing something wrong. But slowly, I remembered what it felt like to just exist without constantly producing. My company continued to grow. We hit 30 employees, then 40. Revenue doubled. But more importantly, I was no longer killing myself to make it happen. I hired good people and learned to delegate. I worked hard, but not at the expense of everything else. A year after the ultimatum, I looked back and realized something remarkable. The worst moment of my family life had become the catalyst for the best chapter of my personal growth. Sometimes you have to lose something to realize what you actually have. Sometimes the people who are supposed to love you the most are the ones who need the firmest boundaries. If you are watching this and you are in a similar situation, if someone in your family is using love as leverage, demanding that you sacrifice your well-being for their wants, I want you to know something important. You are not selfish for saying no. You are not a bad person for having limits. Protecting what you have built, whether it is a business or your mental health or simply your sense of self, is not a betrayal of your family. It is an act of self-respect. Love is not supposed to feel like extortion. And you do not owe anyone, not even your parents, the destruction of your own life. I love my mother. I love my father. I even love my brother despite everything. But I also love myself. And I will never apologize for that again. So here is my question for you. Have you ever been in a situation where someone tried to use family loyalty as a weapon against you? How did you handle it? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one, and I would love to hear your story. If this resonated with you, please hit the like button and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Subscribe to the channel if you want to hear more stories like this. And if you are going through something similar right now, I just want you to know that you are not alone. Thank you for watching and for letting me share this with you. Whatever you are facing, I hope you find the strength to stand up for yourself, even when it is hard. Especially when it is hard. Take care of yourself. You deserve it.